When expectation breaks, you think you're doing okay. The relationship is over. The narcissist is gone. The fantasy is broken. You're picking up the pieces. You're journaling, reading, maybe even talking to someone. You're doing the work. It's not easy, but you're proud of how far you've come. And then one day it happens. Not a scream, not a flashback, not a violent discard or intrusive image, just silence. You send a message to a close friend, someone who knows what you've been through. You wait. An hour passes, then two, then the whole day. Something in you starts to stir. Not anger, not sadness, something else. Something slow, heavy, and familiar, but with no name. You think, why haven't they replied? Then you think, maybe they don't care. Then you think, maybe I've been too much. Then, without warning, the floor falls through, and you're back in it. This is the expectational collapse. Most of us, after narcissistic abuse, are hyper aware of obvious triggers: being ignored, being criticized, being gaslit, being discarded, being idealized and dropped again. But there's a much quieter mechanism that goes unnoticed by nearly everyone, even trauma professionals. It doesn't explode, it implodes, and yet it carries just as much psychic weight. This is expectational collapse when a person you trust doesn't meet your internal script. Not because they're cruel, not because they're abusive, but because you unconsciously needed them to hold something for you and they didn't or couldn't. Maybe they forgot to reply. Maybe they said the wrong thing. Maybe they met you with logic when you needed warmth. Maybe they were just busy or human. But to your internal world, it felt like being dropped. But I wasn't asking for much. No, and that's exactly why it hurts. Because the people this happens with are usually good enough objects: friends, parents, siblings, therapists, people you already trust, people you've already internalized as safe, supportive, and responsive. That trust itself is what creates the collapse when they fail to respond. But here's the truth: after narcissistic collapse, we don't just miss the narcissist, we miss who we were in the gaze of others. And when the people we still trust stop seeing us clearly, we stop seeing ourselves. This is not our fault, but it is our pattern, a universal one. We weren't ready to be alone with ourselves. Narcissistic trauma doesn't just fracture relationships, it fractures the self. And when the self fractures, it starts seeking structure outside itself, not in fantasy anymore. That's broken, but in reality based people, trusted ones. These become scaffolding, emotional architecture, symbols of safe witnessing. But when one of these structures falters, even a little, your entire system sends out an alarm, because somewhere deep inside, your unconscious expected them to carry a weight you weren't quite ready to carry alone. And when they didn't, the whole house trembled, or worse, it collapsed. But they didn't do anything wrong, and that's what we need to realize. This is what makes this kind of collapse so hard to spot. This isn't about them, it's about the bridge you built to get to yourself, and the fact that it relied on them to hold one end of it. That bridge was expectation. Expectation that they would respond, expectation that they would understand, expectation that they would regulate you. And when the bridge failed, you didn't just fall, you disappeared again. What it feels like. Expectational collapse doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like shutting off your phone, or cancelling plans, or writing a long unsent message, or crying alone and then blaming yourself for crying. But internally, it feels like a return to the void, a reactivation of the same annihilation that came after the narcissistic discard. Except this time, it's harder to name, harder to track, because the person you needed didn't abuse you. They just didn't meet your unspoken need. So you blame yourself. I'm too much. I should be over this. I need to stop expecting so much. I ruin everything. They're probably sick of me. I'm exhausting. I'm defective. Does that sound familiar? This is not a breakdown. It's a loop, and you've been here before. It's not rage, it's shame. That's what differentiates this collapse from earlier phases. Earlier, you may have felt rage at the narcissist, panic, denial, bargaining, despair. Those were visible. Those made sense. They were tied to someone who had clearly harmed you. But this is different. It's not reactive. It's reflective. It's cold. This is internalized shame, cloaked in moral maturity. It says, you expected too much. You failed. You are not worthy of a response. And the worst part, you believe it. But what really happened? You expected someone to hold your need. They didn't. So you collapsed. But not because they hurt you. You collapsed because your inner self was still relying on them to be your mirror. Because you weren't ready to stand in your own reflection. You don't need to blame anyone. Not them, not you. But you do need to understand the pattern. Because until you name it, you'll keep building bridges based on silent contracts. You'll keep expecting people to stabilize you in ways they don't know you need. And when they don't, not because they're bad, but because they're human, you'll keep falling back into yourself, confused and ashamed. This is not failure. This is information. This is healing data. The truth about expectations. Expectations are not hope. They are the unconscious projection of self authorship. When you expect someone to respond in a certain way, even gently, what you're doing is outsourcing a part of your internal regulation. You are giving them temporary custody of your sense of safety. And when they fail to hold it, you don't just lose connection, you lose your own authorship. And that hurts, but you can reclaim it. The return to self. The task is not to never expect. That's not human. The task is to become aware of when expectation is standing in for self. The task is to notice the bridge as you're building it and to build a second one beside it, or one that doesn't rely on their reply, one that doesn't crumble with their delay, one that holds even when nobody else does. This is the task of healing, to stop collapsing into others and start to return to the self. If this resonated with you, if you found yourself spiraling after a nothing moment, a slow reply, a blank look, a misattuned conversation, you're not crazy, you're not needy, you're not broken, you're learning how to hold yourself. And every time you notice it, this subtle collapse, this quiet fall, and you name it and stay, you break the pattern. That's what it means to build a self. Not to survive the narcissist, but to become someone who no longer disappears when others look away. That is the real recovery. If this resonates, give me a like, subscribe, and forward, and a little comment to know. Peace out. Loads of love.